And being recorded. Thank you. City Manager Tualatin and the city non-voting city rep.
Peterson, business 2.
Ashley Farrell, business 2. Say 2.
Drake Butch, builder, developer 2.
Glenn Fee, Environment 1. Andy Haugen, District 4.
Alan Jesse, Agriculture 2.
Ramesh Krishnamurthy, District 2.
Lakshmi Tata, Agriculture 1.
Melissa Cleveridge, Chief of Staff with Our Services.
Terry Song, District 3, current chair.
Katie Cheney, Executive Assistant.
Joshua Bernier, Digital Solutions, Clean Water Services.
Shannon Huggins, Community Engagement and Services.
Brad Anderson, Senior Assistant Legal Counsel.
Kathy Weir, CFO.
And the executive management analyst and CEO.
Bill Fig, Chair of the Washington County Citizen Action Network.
And online, can we go to you, Joe?
Good evening, everyone. Joe Gall, the Chief Utility Relations Officer for Clean Water Services.
Fantastic. That's everyone.
Good, thank you. I'll now open our first order of business, selecting a chair and vice chair. CWAC bylaws require an annual selection of a chair and vice chair. Do I hear any nominations or discussion? I have done better advertising.
What is involved in the chair seat, and you can speak to this as well. Hoping to administer the meeting, we will provide you with materials in advance to help and assist with any motions or other tricky bits. It's been on the budget committee, but that's in a separate capacity. Yeah. But otherwise.
Yeah, otherwise, it's not a huge time commitment. Reviewing a great annotated agenda that Katie puts together for us, and then just running the meeting.
Is there a current vice chair?
And he is current vice chair.
For a promotion, Glenn? Well, I've been mentored. I nominate Glenn.
I second that nomination.
We have a motion on the table.
So, yeah, we have a nomination. Glenn Fee for chair. Is there a second? Yes. All in favor?
All right.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, great. Congratulations,
Wow,
Glenn.
that's fast. Better start. He's showing this. Shanghai. I couldn't post that.
Now we need to select a vice chair. So nominations for vice chair.
How long is the position for?
Here.
Year, because I know my term is up in 2026. I would like to renew, but I haven't fully committed to that. And I'm on the budget committee right now currently. But I don't know if that has any stipulations in terms of like my term or anything.
It would just mean that we would need to appoint, if you've opted not to continue, we would need to appoint another vice chair for the remaining of the year, because we typically don't meet in December.
I would be willing to be Glenn's vice chair and learn the ways if.
Nominate Andy.
Second. Okay, we have a nomination of Andy in a second. All in favor?
All right.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, Glenn, you can take over now.
That was quick too.
Just kidding. First on the agenda, Tracy Rainey. Sorry, Tracy. a government relations manager, giving an update on the 2026 state and federal legislative agenda relevant to clean water services. Thank you, Tracy. Get this thing back on track here.
I will do my best. Thank you for having me. Again, Tracy Rainey, Government Relations Manager for Clean Water Services. It is good to see you all again. We do this presentation each year, just going into our state legislative sessions, and then providing a federal update as well. So we're going to talk about our 2026 state and federal legislative agendas that were recently adopted by our board of directors. Just a reminder, the purpose of these agendas is really to give us guidance as we are entering the state legislative session and navigating at the federal level, to help us figure out how we're going to approach different bills, policies, our strategy overall for engaging, how we work with other coalitions, and partnering organizations to advance the priorities and the principles that are included within each of the agendas. So tonight I'll be talking about the legislative agenda development process, which will probably be kind of a review for many of you, what that process looks like. We'll talk about the 2026 state legislative session that is fast approaching. I was actually in Salem today, and so it's already kind of starting to get underway. We'll talk through the specific state legislative agenda that was adopted by our board. And then we'll do the same thing on the federal side. So a quick congressional overview and then talking through our federal legislative agenda, both the principles and priorities. Before I jump into the legislative agenda development overview, just a reminder, when we talk about our agendas, they include both principles and priorities. Our principles are broader. That provides us with more broad guidance on how we're going to approach issues that maybe we did not anticipate going into the year. The priorities are much more specific and tend to capture things that we are, our crystal ball kind of says we're likely to encounter these things. So that's kind of the difference that you'll see there. So our process, again, which will be familiar to many of you. We start in the summer. So this last year in 2025, we started in right around August. In September, through those months, having internal conversations with our staff, taking a look at the 2025 legislative agendas, just to remind them of what's included, see if we need anything added, anything modified, anything taken out. So we do that check-in with a number of different departments within Clean Water Services. The fall is multiple board work sessions with our board of directors to share with them our draft agendas, get their input, their feedback into any modifications that they would like to see, things that are missing or information that they need in order to feel comfortable moving forward. And then the final board adoption usually is happening right around November, December. This time it was December 16th in one of our board meetings that they did that final adoption. So moving into our state legislative session preview. This is a even numbered year, so we are heading into a short legislative session. We are right in the middle right now of legislative days, which is kind of the precursor to legislative session where committees are meeting and we're starting to see some of the legislative concepts that have been filed that will become bills. So the committee bills primarily are what we are seeing right now as committees convene and start talking through different concepts. The first day of session will be February 2nd. We'll talk a little bit more as we get into the specific priorities, but we're going to kick off the session with a water day at the Capitol on Monday, February 2nd. So that will be exciting and keep us very busy. February 4th is going to be our revenue forecast. That's going to be particularly important, as many of you already know. Recent revenue forecasts have not been particularly uplifting for the state in terms of revenues. So we are anticipating that this is going to be a session where we are talking about a number of state agency cuts, both to programs as well as various staffing capacity kind of you name it, that's on the chopping block right now. We're hoping that the revenue forecast will be like the one we saw in November, which was actually not as bad as what we saw in August of 2025. In August of 2025, we were looking at a very significant revenue deficit and pretty significant cuts. It sounds like things have gotten better. The picture's a little more optimistic now. We may be looking at more along the lines of 2.5% or less cuts to different agencies and programs. So we will see what that February 4th revenue forecast shows. That'll give us some good direction on how challenging that will be. Since this is a short legislative session, they must adjourn by March 9th, so no longer than 35 days. So it'll be very fast. With a short session, there's a limit on the number of bills, so 2 bills per legislator. Each committee gets 3 bills, with some exceptions for certain committees that can introduce more bills. So we're already, again, starting to see, we'll probably expect, I think the calculation I usually say around 300 bills during the session.
That's
So-
way less than last year, right? By 1,000.
Well, yeah, oh yeah, no, last year was a record number.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, the long legislative session has no limits, as we learned. So we had a few legislators that tested that with over 200 bills introduced per legislator. So this one will be a lot more controlled, and things will move very quickly. So our deadlines will be kind of right into the first weeks of session and for bills to get moving out of committee. Key issues. So I put these slides together last month. Transportation is going to be a key issue. You've probably seen that covered in media. So talking about the bill that passed last legislative session and that they will be rescinding that and redirecting some funds for transportation maintenance and then trying to navigate a future transportation package for 2027. As I mentioned, again, budget is going to be really key this session. It's been nice in the Capitol building because they've reopened the building. So you may recall that we've been talking about all the seismic renovations that have been ongoing since 2020. And the building is actually now largely open. There's still some portions of it that they're working on, but it is making actually a really big difference because you had a lot of people in a very confined space. So even legislative days, even though we're all talking about budget cuts, which is never fun, there is at least a little better energy in the building because it is open and you're seeing a lot more public that are there, and there's just generally more space for people to be in the building. Economic development, we were just talking about that. We will see there is conversation about potentially an economic development investment this session. Again, budget is a challenge in all of those conversations. So,
You see, 2 quick questions. I know it's probably been asked and answered before, but still please for my own sake. I'm assuming in this development process, lobbyists are not involved.
the agenda development process. So I am even a registered lobbyist. So yes, I would say then yes, lobbyists are involved. And we also have a federal lobbyist on contract, Pete Evich. He's not significantly involved other than to review what our team has put together to make sure that we're not missing something or kind of off track for what's expected, anticipated, or realistic.
And the other one was, it's this process when you work with similar or adjacent agencies to make sure there is overlap, that is.
Yeah, throughout that process, and we were working really closely with Washington County's government relations team, other cities in the region that we're checking in with, associations. So we work closely with Special Districts Association of Oregon Association of Clean Water Agencies. So they're all part of the conversations that really do feed into kind of where we end up landing.
Outline, can you send us details about this water day?
Yes, yeah. Happy to send that information your way.
And
So our 2026 state guiding principle, again, this is the broader overarching principle that just gives us kind of direction for those things we may not anticipate during the session. So We will support efforts, policies, investments to maintain or improve the infrastructure, innovation, efficiency, and effectiveness of water resources to ensure quality of life and economic vitality throughout the Tualatin River watershed. So fairly broad again. Really, if there's an issue policy where we don't feel like you've got clear direction from the board, we do those check-ins with them where we need to.
The question.
Yes.
That's your 2026 state guiding policy. Why would that, is it unique to this year? Or would that not be yours each year? Is it pretty much just plug and play?
That one is fairly evergreen. That's a really good question. Yeah. So I think we made one change last year to that policy, to that principle, to add, I think, economic vitality at the recommendation of Chair Harrington. But yes, that one does stay pretty evergreen. So moving into the state legislative priorities. So we, also fairly evergreen, I would say, is a priority around water infrastructure, and continually advocating for investments in water infrastructure. Now is not a great time to be making the case for increased investment really anywhere. But there are some programs, one in particular, the septic loan program, that did not get funded at the end of the legislative session for 2025. It was anticipated it would be folded into a final budget bill and was not. And that program provides low interest loans to low income households for repairing, replacing septic systems or connecting to a public sewer system. So that fund is now depleted. And so we are in conversations with other stakeholders to see where we may be able to get that program back up and online. So that one particularly, and then really a lot of this conversation around infrastructure is really going to be around avoiding problematic cuts. So I think right now everyone's trying to protect what they can. And really, that's realistically where we're going to be this session. So I don't anticipate significant increases in water infrastructure investment.
Was last year there was a couple of funding bills for housing affordability for infrastructure.
Yes.
Did we support those?
Yeah, we have been involved. Yeah, that's a really good question. We've been involved in those, and we've been making the case for that infrastructure investment connected to housing production, particularly. And we've also been talking about the role of special districts, because a lot of programs are structured with an assumption that city or county is providing the service.
Yeah, most people who think it's a city or county that
Right.
we're a rarity. Even here, people don't understand.
Yes. So we'll be always looking for any voices to help us just make sure, again, as we're reviewing legislation, make sure that districts are eligible for that. But they did make changes to that bill last session, so it does apply to districts as well. But yeah, we've been making that case, where we can, and especially to include districts within some main sources. Ensuring sufficient funding for DEQ, the water quality division in particular. We've been working for many, many years, including prior to when I came on to Clean Water Services, to make sure that that particular department for water quality permitting especially is funded adequately. The state used to be one of the worst in the nation for getting water quality permits renewed. They had a backlog, and there was a lawsuit called the zombie permit lawsuit. And so we've come a long way, and they are back. They're making really significant progress. I'm not gonna say they're back on track, but they made significant progress at getting through their backlog. So we're really watching to make sure that the cuts that are on the table are not going to set us back to, where we've come from. So we've had a lot of conversations with the Joint Ways and Means Natural Resource Subcommittee chairs. One of them is Senator Neera Mislin, who her district is in our service territory, and she's been really a great person to work with. She's very interested, and we've had great conversations so far. Continuing work with DEQ around reuse. There was a bill that passed last session in 2025 that has DEQ pulling together an interagency team to look at reuse policy in the state, figure out where there are impediments and make recommendations for how we can do better in the state at advancing reuse projects. The state really does the rules right now look at reuse like it is a waste that needs to be disposed of as opposed to a resource recovery opportunity. So that conversation is moving more into the agency administrative side. Preserving local infrastructure financing tools for water infrastructure. This one has been on our agenda previously, but we are really looking into any conversations that are around SDCs, as we are really rates and SDC financed as a utility. So, and then a few more on this. So, supporting policies and investments around resource recovery. So, including renewable energy, that would be recycled water, us pulling nutrients out of our wastewater treatment process for fertilizer, biosolids. There is going to be a bill again this session. Representative Penhelm had introduced it in the 2025 session. That is pilot funding for additional resource recovery projects. We do a lot of that already in the district. So really our role in that conversation has been talking about what can be done and achieved and other parts of the state that are looking to do similar. But that's been a conversation that we've been engaged in and excited to see that bill is being reintroduced this session. Advocating to ensure that policies and regulations related to emerging contaminants are protective of the environment, public health, informed by sound data and science, and then reflective of a producer responsibility model to protect utility ratepayers. In recent sessions, this has really been about PFAS. And there have been a number of conversations around PFAS, mainly around product bans. So we had cosmetics legislation that passed in the state. There was a pretty comprehensive bill introduced last session that did not advance. So we continue to be at the table, engaged in those discussions. Supporting efforts to maintain and further promote water utility responsiveness, efficiency, resiliency, including elevating our water workforce needs. We know that we are going to be needing to bring a lot more people into the water industry in the future as we look at succession planning, retirements. So we've been really trying to elevate that conversation, and there is going to be a water workforce appreciation bill that's introduced for this session as a House Agriculture, Land Use, Natural Resource and Water Committee bill. And it will establish a week in October as Water Workforce Appreciation Week. We're really excited. We had some legislators out for a tour recently, and it's a good reminder that not everyone thinks about the 24/7 nature of the work that's being done. So there was some surprise that we would have people working on over the holiday and 24/7. So it's really a great opportunity to have that conversation with legislature and remind them of the importance of that workforce. And then finally, supporting funding opportunities and efficiencies and policies to promote housing while ensuring protection of water quality and public health. So that's a continued legislative priority from past couple of legislative sessions as the housing conversations continue. There's a number of housing bills each session, so we'll expect that the same for the short session. Any questions on the priorities?
What would you consider like a resource recovery that like Ken Helm is thinking of?
So there's been a number of legislators that have taken a trip out. There's a group called the Center for Sustainable Infrastructure, and they have taken folks from agencies, legislators, different individual jurisdictions to Denmark to look at this industrial symbiosis kind of project, if you will, though it's much more than a project. It's really a lot around locating industries that can share what would be a waste with another industry that can use it as a resource. And so that's what they're looking at. But again, a lot of differences between us and Denmark. However, a lot of the work that we've done here is being used as an example of kind of what can be done. A lot of places in the state just don't have the capacity, the technical, resource to really get those projects off the ground.
Countries will see things like district heating So you'll have some industry or thing that will produce a lot of heat. And then that will actually get piped through a whole area and will heat all the surrounding buildings. When went to the International Water Association and meeting in Toronto, they had an example of district heat where they were actually going to tap it to a sewer line that was nearby. That's another source of heat. And they were going to use that to augment and enhance what they had coming in as sort of a past source that then they could put it into their machine and distribute it. So it's, one man's trash is another man's treasure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned some funding cuts, or maybe this is a question for the federal legislative going about in the financial report. Are there any funding cuts that the CWS budget was depending on, but yet and there's been any impact on?
It's a really good question. Definitely not from state funding sources. I'm trying to think, Elizabeth.
Actually, the bit of good news is we had a federal earmark in the form of a Environmental Protection Agency STAG grant, State and Tribal Assistance Grant. And we just found out that the money is coming in on that. So, you trust but verify. And so we had received the award, but not actually gotten the dollars in the door, and dollars are now coming in the door. So far, we're in a good place relative to the state and federal government. And a lot of that, as Tracy alluded to, is that we are primarily funded through rates and SDCs. So we don't, unlike say, a county that has a lot of pass-through dollars, we don't rely on those for our services.
The budget book was so thick, I don't remember.
Yeah.
Don't blame you. Yes.
Excuse me for the question.
Yeah, no, it's a great question.
You got a 5-week session, right? Is the transportation bill gonna have like a limit? Because that's gonna be a rock fight, right? I mean, they had a special session. It took them, what, a month, I think, to come up with the bill. So
Yes, they weren't working that the whole time, but yes, yeah, because they were in flux for a while with
how
it.
much time is there gonna be for anything else? That's where I'm going. I mean,
Yeah, the conversation, from what I understand, and I haven't listened to, I think there was a hearing tonight even, on the transportation issue and maintenance. Is really gonna be around redirecting funding to make it through with the maintenance, the road maintenance that we need. And then, again, now, 2027 and how that will look, but I know, I'm sure there are people who are so excited to go do that one more time and try and pass a more comprehensive bill. So I don't think that we're gonna see a lot other than a lot of redirection that would happen for maintenance. And I think that conversation is moving it forward. The governor is definitely, we've seen, taken a much more active role now, so we shall see how that shapes out. We'll move into just a very quick congressional preview. We're in the second session of the 119th Congress. Republicans are in control of House and Senate. We're in midterm election year, as you probably know. For the budget, we are under a continuing resolution until January 30th, but we have been actually seeing some progress in these last few weeks with some budget bills that have been advancing, including one for energy and water appropriations, as well as interior and environment. So those were part of a 3 package minibus that is advancing, and I believe the Senate should be taking up this week. I think they were trying to do that by the holiday. So we'll see if that continues on its way. So we are seeing actual progress on advancing budget bills. Some of the very large ones we have not seen yet. So to be continuing on that. Some of the key issues, a lot of conversation around PFAS liability that's been ongoing for years now. There was a hearing in November on providing potential protection, liability protection to passive receivers, so water utilities. That discussion continues. I think unclear whether there's going to be any real progress or not on that one. So we'll continue to watch it low-income household water assistance program, there were the funds that came from 2021 that were our first ever federal program for low-income water assistance. It provided 14 million to the state of Oregon that went out to households to help them with their water bills. We've not seen additional funding, so we are looking to see that as a permanent program. But again, I think that's going to be kind of a long-term strategy to try and get that program. But there is really good bipartisan support for that bill right now, and a lot of folks signed on, including some of our federal delegation. The Federal Wipes Act has seen some progress. There's a House and Senate version of that bill to label wipes, not flesh. Oregon already passed a law in 2021 that requires labeling of wipes with that. So this would be the federal one, and I think would probably increase overall enforcement with the state law. There's some permit regulatory reform bills that are packaged in the Permit Act, which you'll see there. It's a mixed bag, really. We're watching that one really closely with the National Association of Clean Water Agencies. There's some things that may be good in there. There's some things that are probably not great in terms of water quality and regulations that are being looked at. So one piece in there that's interesting is changing permit cycles from 5 years to 10 years, which would be an interesting thing. Our permit gets renewed and it feels like it just happened yesterday and we're already about to start another permit renewal. So, and then state revolving fund reauthorization is the other piece in there. There were some proposed cuts last year that were pretty drastic to the clean water and drinking water state revolving funds. I'm really happy to report that in the most recent bills, budget bills that are advancing, that those are at a stable level of funding. So we're not seeing the cuts. There's a 4% cut to EPA, but we're seeing the SRFs are at a pretty level place. So our principles, I won't go long on these, really around water infrastructure, our advocacy around integrated planning approaches. This is really around permit and how we work with EPA to make sure our permits are effective and efficient. Continued investment in local conservation, technical assistance programs and incentives. So working with our agriculture partners on some of the good conservation incentive programs that are out there. And then another around supporting strategies to better understand and respond to arising challenges, including climate related and emerging pollutants. I won't go into great detail at all on the priorities, and I will be back probably after the session to give an update on the state legislative session outcomes. We did talk about a lot of these already. Seismic modifications for Scoggins Dam is still our #1 priority. So we're happy to provide a more thorough update on that. But we did see actually in one of those budget bills, both budget report language that we worked with Senator Merkley on, and that Senator Wyden was also supporting, that basically reemphasizes the importance of the project, and that we would, in opposition really to any reservoir reduction of stored water. And Merkley also secured a $1 million earmark for Scoggins, which we've actually not seen before. We've seen funding that comes through the dam safety program that does advance the project and is helpful. But this is $1 million specifically that needs to be spent to continue to advance the structural project for the facility. Water reuse opportunities. We've seen some actual progress on a program for an alternative water source grant program pilot. So $2 million that was included in one of those budget bills to advance that program. As I already mentioned, low-income household water assistance. We'll be watching for making sure that we can continue to see effective management of Wapato Lake National Wildlife Refuge. Supporting agricultural conservation incentive funding programs. The Farm Bill, there hasn't been a Farm Bill since 2018. That used to happen every 5 years. They did pass a continuing resolution. So part of the bill that was passed in November to keep the government open and avoid the shutdown had 3 years of funding to continue programs. So we haven't still seen a actual Farm Bill passed. It's been kind of more continuing resolution based. And then again, we're, continuing to advocate in the space around PFAS and questions around liability and how that will play out. So that
Does
is,
the Farm Bill have all into clean water services agenda?
it's really around our work with NRCS, there's technical assistance programs and incentives where there's riparian shading that's happening. So it's using farmland that is probably not high production farmland, and having them plant trees, which is providing good cooling for an environment and habitat. But obviously then providing some compensation to the landowner.
I can understand the differences in the legislative priorities between federal and state kind of bills and maybe funding, the other one maybe funding and so on. In terms of the guiding principle, CWS is an organization with a specific charter. Why would those guiding principles be different for state and federal?
That's a really good question. I do think our state one is much kind of a little less specific than our federal ones have been. In this conversation, actually, I think that we've had recently, Elizabeth, if I recall, that we may want to take a look at that. I think it's really been based on just kind of that's been a little bit of the evergreen issues. I think the water infrastructure piece being incorporated into a principle makes a ton of sense because I think it's just been something we've been sounding the alarm on for so long that it just kind of rolls into less of a specific priority. But yeah, I think it's a good question as to why you've got four of them on the federal side and we may.
Even be phraseology, could even be things like, some of the other organizations or companies and things, you have these values, mission and goal. Those kind of drive every other activity. It was similar to that. Guiding principles, I'm thinking would be common across and even be the same for Washington County. County, state and federal.
It's interesting that you say that because a lot of actually the structure there are vestiges of the structure that Washington County uses for their state and federal, which does have more variety because they just have a much broader spectrum of what they work on. And they focus on different things, actual different policy areas at the federal level versus the state level. And this is the first year that we have actually had a standalone agenda separate from the counties before they would move together. Since the Washington County Commissioners would gavel in concurrently with the CWS Board of Directors. And so the agendas would move together. And this is the first year that they're actually fully separate and pulled apart. So we've been having these conversations around what's the right format, and do we start to change some things? So I appreciate the feedback.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this yesterday in the budget meeting. If that common goal is what the study falls into play. For me, it looks like you've taken up all the priorities and then said, what fits these priorities? And that's the guiding principle then. My opinion.
Yeah, I think it's a good observation. Yeah, and again, as Elizabeth said, we kind of took a look at it this year, and now that we're more separate, saying, maybe we can change up that principle to be a little bit more of a catch-all. Not a catch-all, I think that's too broad, but
Evergreen.
and more of an evergreen, something that doesn't touch so specifically on some of those key issues. Because again, it really is intended for us to help us figure out what lens we're using when we're looking at different policies.
And what will happen is Tracy is out there doing due diligence and meeting with other associations, meeting with lawmakers, and trying to look into the crystal ball and see, okay, what do we think is going to happen? And how do we align where we're going to prioritize our time? But there's a huge factor of unknowns, especially when you have hundreds or thousands of bills, depending on short or long session. And so you want something that's sort of high level, that is what your sort of the overarching view that you're going to apply and analyze your kind of unknown legislation through. And that the board can say, yes, that those are our guiding principles. So that we're not having to constantly go to the board on individual pieces and say, oh, what do you think about this? Right? To kind of contemplate those things and capture it.
I don't want to rattle the
Okay.
discussion. I think I've sort of seen in your mind, like,
Yes, yes. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's definitely noted. And I will say on the one difference on federal state is we're on state where we do engage on a much broader variety of bills because the impacts are much more direct. So public contracting bills, as an example, where we're gonna, get into that territory on the state. But federal, we're not, we're relying on others like the National League of Cities to do, we're not getting into some of those things. So it is a little more specific on federal, I think, in that way, but I absolutely noted. I think it's a good comment and observation.
thank you.
So you help me with the basic process. You review all the bills
Yeah.
and you work with your association, I assume.
Yes. Yeah, we'll probably see the state bills. Hopefully, I'm hoping in the coming week would be lovely. Sooner the better. And we already started with the committee bills, but yes, I will go through and review all of those. And then ultimately I'll compare my list to other lobbyists. League of Oregon Cities, I'll ask their water lobbyists, like, what's on your list? We'll share and kind of compare those.
And then you run them up internally, and then if the few that you need to have the or take a position on your run.
Yeah, if we don't feel like we have adequate guidance through the principles and priorities, then we will do that check-in with the board. So ideally, those are few and far between typically. But again, if we look at something and it feels a little tricky in that sense, then we will have that conversation with the board. And we really try and use those principles priorities so that we can be nimble and quick. Because the board meetings are, that delay in a short session especially can mean that we kind of lost the chance to advocate and engage. So
Okay.
a lot of bill review, a lot of working with other associations.
How do you keep the board involved, like in reporting throughout?
Yeah, that's actually a little bit changed. Well, we're trying to figure out how that's looking with the cadence of that check-in with the board. But we're going to be having, I think, to do a little bit more email check-in probably on some things and updates as well. Just again, I think the long session is a little easier and it is with how quick the short session moves. But yeah, I don't know, Elizabeth, if you have anything further on the cadence of when we may check in.
So one thing that I think is implicit in what Tracy is saying that we haven't shared with CWAC because we haven't met since November is in working with the board, there was a desire for CWS to move to standalone meetings. So instead of the county commission gaveling in and having what I think the chair would call integrated meetings with CWS, we are now going to, starting in February, meet on the second and fourth Tuesdays of the month, and it will be a CWS meeting where they will handle CWS business, which makes the timing also of getting review all that more challenging. If you have a chamber deadline that is a week and a half long and you only meet every other week, it's difficult to go forward for direction. So some of these things we are figuring out kind of in real time on how to address issues, which is why I think this time around we're likely to do more written updates. And if we do need something to go through, we'll work with our colleagues on the county side to say, okay, we have a letter that we need to have vetted. Can we get some dispensation or a special board meeting or whatever we need to get clarity and direction?
I feel like so far what I'm seeing, I don't anticipate any really big curveballs this session. So I shouldn't say that out loud because now I probably will. But yeah, yeah, I know. What have I done?
Speaking of curveballs. I don't know if this is a question for you or Elizabeth. CWS is usually great in supporting city bills, city projects that come about, and it's usually in step with LOC. So is CWS already taking a position on Senator Salmon's bill with the city of Hillsborough that will impact CWS and its service demands if it passes.
Tracy?
We were just talking about that, Bill, this afternoon. I was talking to Elizabeth because I did sit down with the lobbyist for City of Hillsborough today. So we're reviewing all the details of the language. So we will be reaching out to Hillsborough and talking through any challenges that we flag in that, or if there's any impact in terms of infrastructure, timing, costs, whatever that looks like. And we have regular check-ins with Senator Solomon as well. So I need to read the language still. It just came out. So
Tuesday or Wednesday, right? It just came out.
yeah, that was. So, yeah, so well,
Quick summary of what that bill is.
again, reviewing that one. Do you want to provide it? Because I feel like you're pretty well versed in it.
I can offer what I know because I've heard a
Let's say
couple of
provide
briefings
the
from Andy
overview.
Smith, who used to be with the city of Hillsborough
Mhm.
and is now a lobbyist supporting I think the city and the Washington County Chamber of Commerce. It is a bill that would move forward the original components of Senate Bill 4, which had about 1,700 acres in North Hillsborough that would be available for jobs, not for jobs. It has in addition to that land portion that is just focused in that North Hillsborough area, it has a number of other tax incentive and business oriented, trying to generate jobs in this state, and also potentially some regulatory proposals that would help the economy here. That's probably as deep as I should go.
So is the bill to acquire the land? Is that what we're talking about?
No, it's to authorize that land, as I understand it, from, again, very high level, just like Senate Bill 4 would have authorized that land to be brought into the UGB, it's to authorize the land to be potentially brought into the UGB, is my understanding.
Yes, I think you said it very well. I was gonna say I know it's 1,700 acres of land, but yeah, it's very similar. But again, I don't know everything that has been folded into
Yeah.
it. at this
The
point.
question, the question is obviously because it would impact CWS's operations. That's where that comes from.
Yeah, and we were engaged in the Senate Bill 4 conversations as well. And there's been some ongoing discussions with the governor's office and stemming from the CHIPS Act as well. So we'll be looking to see and make sure that all the pieces that we've kind of flagged are. As an example, I know at one point in Senate Bill 4, there were some timelines where there was no way we were going to be able to deliver infrastructure within kind of that line. So we'll be reviewing, make sure we don't have any of those challenges that are.
Sure.
I think it's called the Oregon Jobs Act. I think that's the title of the bill. And it does fold in, as I understand it, folds in a lot of things like potentially refundable like tax credits and some timelines for engineering review that presumably would move projects along. I think our engineering staff are somewhat concerned about having a timeline on these really technical types of projects to, if they don't get to them in review, that we don't have a review potential. So anyway, I think it's a mixed bag, but we're watching it closely.
And it's just curious how much engineering's been done because 1,700 is going to require a lot of CWS and everything else. And it's great to say it's going to come in, but and it was Joe Gall knows it takes a lot of engineering and a lot of studies to get that stuff really ready to go. Years.
Yeah, yes,
And-
and it really depends too on what is coming in. There's some manufacturing, semiconductor that is going to have a lot more water involved, and some other, distribution. So there's, I think that's been for us trying to figure out exactly what we think maybe going in, and make those predictions about what that means for capacity and treatment and all of those pieces. So yeah, this one will be a good update for the post session. And yeah, we'll be working really closely. Like I said, I talked with the city of Hillsboro's obvious today about it, but it was a pretty brief conversation. So I let her know that we're removing the language. We'll get back to them.
Will we get an update from you mid-session? I think our next meeting is, I mean, it's a busy week, obviously, for you, but, can we or will we get one? Because it's February, what is our next meeting? Second week of this session.
Might look at a written update if you're,
Be happy to do that.
yes.
Yeah,
I'd like that. It'd
Yeah.
be good.
we can include a list of kind of the bills that we're tracking and have identified as higher priority for us.
Yeah, because you usually give one to the board. Anyway, that could just be forwarded to us.
Yes, yeah,
Is
we'd
that
be
fair?
happy to.
Elizabeth, is that okay?
Yes.
I do all kinds of updates to, yeah.
So if we have a specific question about a specific bill at some point, do,
Reach out to me and I'll work with Tracy.
all right.
Yeah.
One other quick question about the Wapato Lake one. I know that, the agency is just criminally underfunded. Is that essentially what that's about? Fish and Wildlife Service, and I think especially, Wapato Lake, I mean, they basically don't have anybody there. Is that essentially what your concern is?
Yeah, the operation maintenance fund is really what we're looking at. Yeah, and so we've talked with, and it's been a little while, I think, since we've checked in with Rebecca Chuck. But just making sure again that facility is able to be maintained functionally, because there's critical components there for water quality, absolutely, and for drinking water quality as well. So, yeah. So if you hear anything, let us know on that one, because we're always kind of watching it.
I did know we were in a meeting with the Confederated Tribes on Friday, Grand Ronde, and they actually have somebody who is going to be there over the next year, through a grant to do I think it's like a 2-acre, plot on, like a demonstration plot on, planting, indigenous species there. So it's at least a person who's going to be up there, in tribal, a lot more tribal presence up there. So you might want to check in with them
Yeah,
as well.
that's great.
So that was a small positive. They're not going to be doing any infrastructure work on it, however.
Oh, that's great to know.
Any other questions for Tracy? Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you for the time.
Recognize that Rebecca Shell has joined us. Next up is Brad Anderson, provide training on public meeting law. Brad, thank you.
Good evening, y'all. Brad Anderson, I'm the Senior Assistant Legal Counsel here at Clean Water Services. Prior to that, I worked legal department for Washington County for 18 years and then have 10 years of experience at other counties across the state. I've given this presentation in various versions many, many times over the years to board members as well as advisory committees. If you have any questions, you certainly can stop me and ask questions. We're gonna do a refresher. For some of you members, you've seen these slides before, and there's a lot there. I'm not gonna cover everything on the slides because you have the packet and some of it is less relevant to you than it is to like the employee who this definitely is important to. And also because you're an advisory committee, that makes it a lot easier on certain aspects as well. And we have staff that does a lot of this work in the background behind on the public meeting piece, so you don't have to really worry about that part. But we'll go through it, and like I said, if you have questions, we can go through those. So first of all, how many people have been on this committee for 5 years or more? Okay. And how many like this is your first term? Okay, and how many have seen a presentation like this before? Okay. Kind of gauging, the level of awareness on these issues. I suspect you have heard, the form of government in the CWAC history. We'll talk about that briefly. We'll talk about public meetings law, talk about Oregon ethics law and public records. I don't think it's necessarily in that order, but we'll go for it. So, as you are probably aware, Clean Water Services is a county service district formed under ORS 451. That is unique. You may have heard of other types of districts that aren't like Clean Water Services. Often they are called a special district. So Tualatin Valley Parks and Rec, special district formed differently. THPRD, well, that's THPRD, the fire district too, and the water district. Those are all formed under OS 198 and have their own special governing body. Because Clean Water Services was formed as a county service district, its governing body is the Washington County Board of Commissioners. As you see, they're charged with, the district is charged with providing wastewater, stormwater, surface water management services. You probably know all this stuff. It was created in 1970 and it was named Clean Water Services in 2001.
How was it created?
It was created by a vote of the residents of Washington County.
So it was a measure. I mean,
It was an initiative that was on the ballot. It was kind of unique in how it was formed because at the time there had to be legislative changes to even allow the creation of this particular county service district. And
The state building moratorium.
yeah.
September of 1969. And the county had gone through planning for both, they'd done master planning for water and sewerage. And they ended up just moving forward with the sewerage side of the aisle because that was what was really causing a lot of problems. And that led to the building moratorium because of the public health crisis, which is why you have the actually both of those blurbs. So that went into place, September of 69. And then the county referred to the voters in December, I think a measure, and it was on the ballot in February of 1970.
Right. Yeah. It was to address a crisis, as you probably all know, but the Tualatin River was a little tiny creek that was full of icky stuff. And there was no big body to manage it all. It was 26 little facilities. And so to address the issue holistically, the Washington County created a task force, I believe, and then that led to the asking the voters to vote on whether to create a county service district.
It was not overseen by the feds then, and they didn't issue standards. Is that correct?
I don't know the answer.
That's correct.
That sounds correct.
Yeah. Because you had the 26 different little facilities. Those were different bodies, and you had some private, some public. And so it was this tremendous effort when you think about the amount of coordination and governance work that had to be done. And a lot of folks had to agree to their own dissolution to then go into this new regional service. Which, thinking about undertaking something of that scale now feels pretty daunting.
Right. But there was a crisis. No more building. That's kind of, the big stick. I was at the state level, that's the building moratorium. CWAC has always been a part of Clean Water Services history since its inception. The advisory committee organization has evolved and changed over the years. You'll see that the current configuration was established in 1991. All your members are are appointed by our board of directors, which is the board of commissioners. And the Clean Water Service Advisory Committee is governed by bylaws in resolution 12-01. I looked at that up today. As a preview of future attractions, we're gonna have to come to the advisory committee and talk about updating, revising the bylaws. They just I've reviewed bylaws over the years, and these are pretty skinny. Don't address a lot of issues that you typically want to address in a advisory committee through your bylaws. Simple operation of the meetings and the like. And so that is a future attraction that Elizabeth will be bringing to you.
That out today.
Yes, we found that out just today. Thank you, Dale, for pointing that out to us. We're going to talk about public meetings law, and here's a quote from the statute. But basically, in the United States, in Oregon, our meeting, we don't make decisions in private. If we're the government, we make them in public. And so that's the basis of public meetings law. A lot of this, I think, came out of Watergate, public records for sure. But the general concept is the public is available to watch it when decisions are made by the government. A lot of words here on this slide, but basically, public meetings applies to the county service district, most levels of government, and their advisory groups, which you are one of them. So public meetings law applies to CWAC. So this is, so what has to happen on, how does the public become aware of it? Well, there's statute that tells us what we have to do and notifying the public. So that public is aware that a meeting is taking place and where they can watch it. It may be online these days as well. So CWAC is not, I don't know if this group is or not, but are we live streaming here or is it? Okay.
We're not on YouTube, but it's a live Zoom, and then that will be recorded.
Okay.
Meeting is recorded and it's uploaded to the website.
Yeah, and this was starting, but COVID really brought us into the 21st century. And so like Joe's watching us right now. Yes. The thing is, Joe, you don't have to worry about any of this because our fine team, but Katie, they do all this notice. But just to be aware that there is a process and we go through that. Also,
Can you go back?
yeah,
At least 24 hours unless there's an emergency. So in the city of Tualatin, it's longer than that, and the emergency is 24 hours. We have to give at least 24 hours if there's an emergency.
yes. State law that does say 24 hours, but most jurisdictions have a longer period of time in the rules of procedure. We recently went through this exercise, as Elizabeth told you, we created some board rules of procedure for the board of directors of Clean Water Services now that we're separating the meetings. And we took a hard look at that on what our notice requirements were because Washington County has much longer notice requirements. So you just got to look, you got to look at your foundational documents. But state statute is 24 hours. Yes.
So this may be a rhetorical question, but I'm also an elected commissioner of the West Slope Water Board.
Of which?
The West Slope Water Board.
Oh, yeah.
So I bring this up even there. Bulletin method of notice. Because one of the things that I've always talked about is public participation, even in today's meeting, right? Where is the public participation? It's so low and it's, most of the time it's zero. So I don't know which end of the problem I want to speak about, but at least, for example, it says reasonably calculated to inform standards. So the organization just barely meet and fly under the radar, or is there a way to somehow incentivize, encourage participation and really get public involved in all these meetings? Where do we stand?
Yeah, and this has really changed over the years. I've been doing this for 30 years now, and it used, I started in the pre-internet days, and so it was like you had this bulletin board and you just published it, or you stuck it on the bulletin board that there was a meeting coming up. Obviously, that's changed over time. What you'll see with Clean Water Services is it's on our website, and with CWAC, it's a little different. It's all on our website, and that has been usually looked at as a reasonable notice. But in addition, I have talked to our folks about sending out a email to interested parties. And that's a way to provide notice to people that we know may have an interest.
And we do currently send this out to an interested parties list, but we're also looking at, with the separation of the meetings, having an email just around Clean Water Services public meetings that would include board meetings, CWAC meetings, and audit committee meetings. Those would be the public meetings that we have. So that folks could get notice of all of those. So you wouldn't necessarily need to be a CWAC interested party. You could be just interested in Clean Water Services in general, and then learn that we have a CWAC meeting. So it will help to improve the process of reaching out.
Yeah, I agree. See, that's why I said we discussed this forever. Or even the monthly newsletter that Joe sends out or wherever. I'm trying to understand whether it is just public apathy that they don't want or they don't care, or I don't know, attitude, or is it, do we need to make some different effort or some effort to make sure that we have some public, I know I'm representing the public here, but the kind of public participation we talked about, what I was trying to.
Yeah.
Maybe discussion for another day, but
Yeah.
that's something that bugs me in every public meeting. I also sit on some of the, it's one other governmental board, apart from all the corporate boards, but there, where are the public, who's there?
Yeah, I would say the one thing with also providing a live stream is you may not see bodies in the room. There may be people watching, paying attention, and so that's an advance we've made. You may not know they're there at all, but there are some people there.
The finance budget meeting, for example, we did have some people show up.
Yeah.
And it was really, some of the questions they brought out was, I wasn't expecting that, or where did this come from? But if they meet, for example, if those kind of people have been involved throughout the year and the other discussion, there might have been a better understanding for them to say, why are you doing this? Why are you not doing this? That's where I'm coming.
This is something you don't need to worry about either. We have folks taking minutes of this meeting. This describes kind of what they do with the minutes, and then they also have a copy of the live stream that is put on YouTube as well. But we rely on the minutes because we have to keep these forever, and minutes are easier to keep than video, believe it or not, because as you know, technology changes rapidly, and trying to keep up with technology is often challenging.
Already keeping the writing notes as a card, right?
All right. Ethics. So let's talk briefly about ethics. You're a public official. By being on an advisory committee, you are a public official, as well as every other every public employee is a public official and has to follow ORS chapter 244. Ethics under this chapter is not necessarily what you might think of as ethics. It's usually all about money. And it's, how am I going to get a financial gain or avoid a financial detriment by being a public official? That's what the ethics law really aren't. It's not that you're an ethical person. It's mostly about money. Frankly, most of our ethics laws come from state legislators behaving badly. And so we all get punished for their bad behavior in reality. So what does that mean? So the general rule, as you see up there, is a public official cannot use their position to benefit themselves, a relative, household member, or business with which the official is associated. Okay. That's a mouthful, but basically it's anybody who you're supporting, or if you're, part of a business, would it benefit your business that you have a personal financial stake in? There's a whole bunch of detail on this, but I'm not really going to get into because it gets really complicated really quickly. But this is the most important take home for you is if you have a conflict of interest, which means you're going to financially benefit or a family member, then if you're making a decision, the question is, would it be an actual conflict of interest? Would you benefit from that decision, or could you? Okay. Fortunately for this group, you're really not ever going to run into a situation where you're going to financially benefit from a decision that an advisory committee makes, because you're making advisory decisions that will be moved forward to the Board of Commissioners that will actually make that decision. So you shouldn't ever run into an actual conflict. It's more of a potential conflict. And given the nature of this group, which was designed to have people with interests in particular interests on this particular committee, there are conceivable scenarios where you could have a financial benefit. So what does that mean? That means you just have to declare it in advance before taking a vote on anything. So you just say, hey, I work for such and such industry, and my industry may benefit from this vote. And you just get it on the record, it'll be in the minutes, and then you're good. Okay, so public records law also applies to you. And this is actually a pretty important issue for you to be familiar with. So anything regarding your CWAC business here, if it's in a writing, which includes email or a text, then that is a public record, and the public can ask for it. We get regular public records requests. Now, I haven't seen one that has to do with CWAC types of issues, but it's a daily occurrence. And we would have to get that record and then determine if an exception to releasing it applies. And if an exception doesn't apply, then we release it. And so we're releasing records frequently. I review a lot of these public records requests, and we're releasing records. Where this is unique to you all is, you don't have a unique email address, a clean water service email address. So it's challenging if we get a public records request for records that related to you. So who's Donut 97 here? All right. So that's his personal email address, but we send CWAC information to you, Andy. And so so there may be a scenario at some point where you will get a call from Norma Bustamante in our office and say, hey, do you have any records relating to CWAC that relate to X, Y, or Z, whatever it is. And then we would have to obtain those records and then review them and then make them available to the public if they were disclosable. So it's unique. Typically what we would do is everybody has a clean water service email address, so we could look at it in the background. But in those rare circumstances where you may get a public records request, then it becomes an issue. I haven't seen it yet, but I've had the uncomfortable, it was more in litigation realm, situation where I've had to ask a board of commissioner member, can you turn over your phone? Because we need to look at your phone. Never a comfortable situation, but it has happened because they were conducting business on their personal cell phone. So that's just to keep in mind. And remember, it's a public record. And so what we always tell our employees, if you don't want to see it on the front page of the Oregonian, don't write it down. So maybe it's a phone call. So just be aware of that. And it's anything in writing. Phone messages are not, that's an exception, but this is it's writings. So if it's in Clean Water Services records, we'll have it. And like I said, it's anything. I do want to go back on a few things. I took a bunch of slides out, it turns out. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about is serial. There's this newish concept of serial meetings. So what does that mean? That means, and you've seen it in the city of Portland if you've been watching lately at all, where certain council members are texting each other, sometimes in the middle of a meeting. And what they're doing is they're communicating and taking positions. That's a problem because that is really, if there's more than a quorum on that message, that's a meeting. Because they're theoretically making decisions and not doing it in the live day. So that's something you want to be careful with. And so like if you get an email and it's to everyone here and you want to talk about a particular issue, that's an issue if you're all hanging in on that particular item. So what our advice always is just, come to the board, the meeting, and then talk about it in the public. But you're going to see the city of Portland get into big trouble on this because they've been flouting the public mediums law by doing this. And ironically, how's it figured out? Because people are making public records requests for those texts. So they found out that, they're talking about city business and then they're also saying, oh, let's go meet at such and such bar and talk about this stuff. Oh, well, that's a meeting too, potentially. So that's just one area to keep an eye on and it's come up periodically. So we've been advising pretty carefully on that issue that, if you get an email from Katie on scheduling a meeting, probably don't chime in unless it's innocuous type of stuff about like, what do you want for dinner or something like that, So
We will often BCC this group. And part of that is to eliminate the reply all issue, which can lead to a serial meeting.
yes,
So then you're just replying directly to Katie or directly to myself. But then if I were then to come back and say, oh, well, I heard from Sherilyn, Terry, and Bart, if I heard from,
Yeah.
40% of the group and I talked to 2 more people and that got me over 50%, well, now I violated the serial meeting law. So I also take very seriously my role in helping to make sure that we are doing everything above board.
Yeah, and a lot of this came out of practice that was happening in Lane County down in Eugene years ago, where they were using their county administrator to basically collect thoughts from all the electeds and then tell each other what they were doing, and then they go into the meeting and they actually do it, type of thing. And so the court said, yeah, that's a meeting. That's a problem. So so that's why we're very careful on how we train on this, because it's an important issue. And, you know, the whole purpose of public meetings law is to shine a light on the decision-making process. So I've talked a lot. Do you have questions?
From a practical standpoint, since we don't make decisions, since we don't really take votes per se in my short time on here compared to some of those that have been on here for a while, can you maybe zero us in, really bring focus to what are the one or two things that we actually do that we need to be particularly sensitive to when we're doing them? Because I'm just thinking about, we don't take votes and we're not, yeah, there's just a lot of things that we don't do.
The two things that come to mind for me, but do you want to?
Oh, go ahead.
So there are occasions where the board will charge CWAC with making particular recommendations. And CWAC might vote on what those recommendations are. To me, that would get to the could. It wouldn't get to the would, because again, you're taking a vote on what the policy recommendation would be for the board. The other is for those that serve on the budget committee. I think there's heightened level of scrutiny there because you're 5 out of the 10. And so then you are voting to approve the budget at the end of the day. So those are the things that come up for me.
Taking votes, Mark. Recommendation.
Oh, yeah, I was just saying, we rarely, if ever, take votes, but that's what I was trying to focus in on.
Some issues that were brought up that we actually went around the table. Guess what? It was unanimous.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't come up as often for an advisory committee, frankly. But it, you know, when I'm advising the board, it comes up all the time. So, yeah.
Curious, if you were like texting people individually, like during the meeting, kind of going to the serial lot, does that still count? Or does it have to be more of like a larger group chat?
So there's an easy response and a complicated response to that. So, you know, it depends on if you're pinging all your, you know, separately all friends and trying to get to a, you know, a decision point. That's where you run into the problem with the individuals. If it's group, you got a problem if it's over the quorum amount. And that's the problem that Portland, I think, ran into, is I think they ran over a quorum. We always advise not to do that because it just has an appearance of a problem anyway. You know, I mean, this has been going on. This isn't, you know, the Portland thing wasn't the first time this has ever come up. Multnomah County had it come up a number of years ago too, where they were just, the reporters saw them texting and in you know, while they're doing deliberations, it's like, what is going on here? So, so the short answer is just don't do it. Don't do it with each other. Well, with our board, we have five members, and I've worked a lot of years with boards that were 3 members. So 2 is a quorum type of thing. So they couldn't talk about anything. 5, we do this. Phone a friend, or you have one friend that you can talk to on this group about, but nobody else. So that's where the challenges really come up. But I mean, the risk is low on this group, but best practices, just don't be texting each other about business that could come before CWAC. I will say that one of the challenges we're seeing, and you know, 12 certainly is too, is the Ethics Commission is taking a very proactive role, I guess, in enforcement, and are taking some positions that have frankly surprised people that have been in this business a long time, so we are being really cautious right now on all sorts of things. Including food and everything else under the moon, because they haven't seen a situation that isn't a problem. It seems like lately, there's a thing. I'm not going to get into some of the weird details that have come out of the Ethics Commission lately, but they are hyper vigilant right now and are seeing violations on almost every complaint that's coming in these days. So when we train you, it's with that in mind.
Presumably that's Washington County Ethics Commission.
No, this is state ethics commission.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so this is a state there, so I guess I didn't do a very good at explaining it. So there is a state ethics commission that's appointed, and they've got various members on the ethics commission. And it's not so much, so if someone has an ethics complaint, and just to back way up, when you get an ethics complaint, that's on you. It's personal. It's not on the district, Clean Water Services. And so you have to defend yourself, and what the process is, they'll assign it to an investigator, and then they'll make a quick, oh, yes or no, proceed, or this isn't within our jurisdiction, or this is clearly not an ethics violation type of thing. Okay, so after that go, no go, decision is made, if there's a proceed further, then they'll do an investigation, and they will contact the individual that the complaint is against and say, hey, tell me about this, what happened, etc., and then as well as review the complaint. And if they see enough there, they will bring it to the Ethics Commission, which is a volunteer group of appointed members by legislators and the governor, and they will make a decision on whether there was an ethics violation or not. They also have jurisdiction over public meetings too. And I've actually ended up in a scenario where we had an ethics complaint on a public meeting, and it was a challenging scenario because we couldn't represent members, but we could provide information to the investigator on what happened. And I mean, we're going through some of these issues right now too, but it's not public meetings, it's more this ethics issues benefit. So that's kind of big scale how it works mechanically.
But I think in our packet, there was a reference to a public records grievance. Is that the process we're talking about here?
So that is a new statute, and so all public entities now have to provide a grievance process if someone thinks that there has been a violation of public meetings law. This is a new statute, and so we have to put on our website, if you want to make a grievance, here's where you make it to, and this is the contact person. So Clean Water Services does this, and that's actually how the city of Portland got tripped up, because somebody did file a grievance. There's some unique aspects. You got to make that grievance within 30 days of the meeting itself too. And in at least the first incident with City of Portland, that was not done within 30 days. So if anybody has a challenge with or is concerned about how you conducted a public meeting and thinks you violated public meetings law, file a grievance with the local government, and that government can respond. If you're not satisfied with that response, you can take it to the Ethics Commission.
Yeah. What is the, I guess, penalty for any violations we have of that? Typically fines? What type of?
Yeah, that's a real good question. Fines are an option. And with meetings, it's a really tricky Um, because, you know, I think they have a schedule that they use to figure out, you know, what, what the penalty should be. I haven't, the only case I'm aware of where there was an actual fine was in the Lane County cases years ago. But it was a different process back then too. So I think there was court cases involved with it. Well, I know there was court cases involved with that. So, we haven't seen it yet, so we don't know what it would really look like. It's usually a letter of education type of thing, like don't do that again type of thing. And actually when a letter of education goes out, then everybody pays attention because they want to know, what did that entity do, and let's not do it.
So I assume that is a process for whistleblowers, see conflicts of interest or see violations of.
Say that again?
Is there a forward process for someone like a whistleblower who sees or observes looking to?
Well, with public meetings, that's the grievance process that Terry was talking about. You submit it to the person that's on the web page, which every jurisdiction is supposed to have on their web page. And then they can respond. They have to respond and say yes or no, or other. So that's the process. If you're not satisfied with that response to a public meeting challenge, then you go to the Oregon Ethics Commission and file a complaint. And if you're ever interested, you go to their webpage and you can see all the decisions they've done over the years, and it's searchable on, what type of situation you're talking about. And I mean, there's plenty of them. So that's a good place to look. There's also, I don't know if we shared with this group that you can get the Public Officials Guide to Ethics Laws.
There's a hyperlink in this.
Yeah, so it's about 40 pages long. It goes through examples or scenarios where this happens. A lot of the examples are. My first job was in Eastern Oregon, and small communities, and everybody knows everybody else, and your brother might be, the big contractor in town. And so there's a lot of just family dynamic situations that come up in there. And so it's actually a bigger challenge in those jurisdictions because everybody knows everybody else, and these actual conflicts come up quite a bit. I'm not talking about public meetings right now. I'm talking about ethics laws. And so, you may have a volunteer city council where, your brother's sitting on the city council voting on a contract for you to do the plumbing. And, if you're the city council member, you can't vote on that. So, but we're in a larger jurisdiction, doesn't come up as often.
Any other questions for Brad? Thank you, Brad.
All right, thank you.
We're almost right on time here. Next up, we'd like to invite Kathy Leader to give a presentation on the fiscal year 2024-2025 year-end financial report. Kathy.
Good evening. I'm Kathy Leader, Chief Financial Officer for Clearwater Services. I'm here tonight to give a presentation on the results of operations for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2025 for the district. And just some history behind the start of this report. first time we ever presented this quarterly report was back in 2021 to our board of directors, and it was really in response to the pandemic. And some of the decisions were made in response and helping the community and the economic relief to the community. In first, deferring rate increases that were planned in that year of 2021. And then also in some of the positions that we had planned to add, we deferred them also and told the board that we would come back mid-year and show how revenue was collecting, how expenditures were going to see if we were in alignment and to add those positions. So that was really the start of this report itself. Now we go a couple times a year to the board with updates. In your packet, you do have in the very back, there is a summary by year of budgeted and actual revenues. So you can actually see the detail behind the summary of this report as a reference of the different revenues and expenditures that we are looking at. But what we're going to look at today is for Q4, so that's July through June of 2025. We're going to look at the percentage of budgeted revenues collected for those, and our reports show you a 5-year history of that, so 21 through 25. Then we're going to be looking at the similar time period percentage of budget spent in that year, and then just an overall discussion of the results of operations. So first, starting with revenue collected. So this graph you're seeing here, this focuses on two main revenue sources for us. It's service revenues and system development charges. So those make up about 89% of the revenues that the district collects, so a significant portion of our revenue base. And this graph is showing you across the line that the bars are the actual dollars revenue collected by quarter. And the line is that percentage of budget revenue collected by quarter. So there's two graphs going on in there. It's cumulative. So you start out the year, and as you can see, these are service fees that are collected throughout the year, and the district has consistently had a level collection of revenue over the quarter by year, as you can see from the flow of that graph. If you go over then to fourth quarter, which is the far right bars there. So fourth quarter fiscal 25, we collected 102% of budgeted revenues versus what we, there's a 3-year average that is 101. So it's basically taking all 5 years in that fourth quarter, and that average is about 101% of revenue budgeted collected for us. You see there for 24, we do see that was 1 year where we were below budgeted amounts at 96%. And that really is a reflection in most cases of system development charges that we collect. It's very volatile, and depending on the year, we can collect significantly more or less based on the type of development that's happening in the cities or unincorporated areas.
Kathy, do you have a goal of trying not to go way over like 110%? That would mean that like you're budgeting too conservatively for revenue, maybe, or I mean, you're pretty consistent in like 102, 100. My eyes can't quite.
Yeah,
that
100, 107, 105. And so those years where you see those significant amounts above the 100, 101, those really are SDC reflected, and then they're volatile. But yeah, so normally on the service revenue side, we have a pretty strong revenue forecasting, and we've done pretty well in identifying based on our rate increase and growth what we would see. But SDCs can fluctuate for us.
Kathy, I don't know if you have level of detail, but when you project or when you're saying it's 102% of the budget, so is there some metric to say how much of it has come from the 4% increase we approved in budget versus actually increase in services?
So good question. You're right into, as we go further on, I'm going to show you some of the backing of these revenue collections too. So yeah, we'll talk a little bit about that. And then the second slide we're showing here, similarly, it's 5 years of history by quarter, the bar being the dollar amount, the dotted line being the percentage of budget spent by quarter. And so you can similarly see that spend is pretty consistent and level over the year, although I will say the first quarter of any fiscal year, we're usually the first 3 months doing a lot of accrual back to the prior fiscal year for construction invoices and invoices that relate to services through June 30. So there's a ramp up that happens that second quarter on that you don't see in the first quarter, just because during that period, a lot of the invoices coming in really relate to the prior fiscal year and are accrued back to that fiscal year. If you go over, so also, if you go over to the far right, this is our fiscal year 2020. Q4 is the dark line. 85% of budget was spent during that year, and the 3-year average is 79% for that for budget spend. And when you're seeing those significant reductions in spend, like for instance in 21 at 75% and 24 at 23 at 69, those really relate to our capital spend. That one, on some years, we've had a slow capital delivery, and that's really where you see those reductions in spend.
Kathy, is there a similar chart for operating budget spend?
So we'll talk a little bit about each, but this is a combination. So, oh, that's a good point. This is a combination of operating and capital here too. Yeah. So,
Right. My question was, are there numbers for the two budgets separately?
Yeah.
So does the operating budget typically spend at 95% of authorization, or is it down in the 80s typically?
yeah. So overall operating is usually at about 90%, but 85 to 90. But labor is usually more down in the 80%, and M&S is usually 85 and 90. So it's really the labor in operating that has these reductions in spend to budget. So what we talked about, and we'll note here too, it's some of the vacancy positions. So starting out first with revenues collected. So service fees, those are the sanitary and sewer service fees billed for regional and local services. Those fees collected increased by 8.7 million in fiscal year 2025. That's up 5.4%. And that is reflective of that 4% rate increase and our historical growth in connections at 1.5%. So it's really in alignment with where we saw rate increases and growth for that. Industrial revenues, we do all the billing of industrial customers within Washington County, and we remit a portion of the local component to the cities that industrial customers reside in. But industrial revenue total about 18.9 million. That was an increase of 1 million or 10.5% compared to the same quarter last year. So up a bit in industrial. System development charges, so when we talk about, for new connections to the system, can be very volatile depending on what's going on in the region. We collect the SDCs collected total of 22.9 million, and that was an increase of 3.7 million or 19.3% compared to the prior year. So development was up in 25.
Kathy, did I hear you say that Clean Water Services bills, like physically bills for the industrial?
Yeah, so the flow related and load charges, we bill for all customers in Washington County. And if the industry resides in the city limit, then there's a local component, and they might have also a right-of-way fee that we charge for them. So on the cost side, on the operating and spend side, so labor costs increased by 7.6 million or 12.5% compared to the same quarter last year. This reflects the addition of FTEs. We did budget 12 additional FTE in that year. The increase also reflects our cost of living adjustment and pay for performance for employees. some class and comp reclassifications within our non-rep groups, and then, benefit cost increases like medical insurance. On the maternal services side, that increased by 3.3 million or 7.7% compared to that same quarter in 24. And these were in areas we anticipated increases within our budget, and that is in like software maintenance fees, electricity, chemical, the electricity chemical regulatorily driven. We also, we joint bill with Walton Valley Water District, and we had gone to a new billing system a few years back, and we've been having some issues with stabilization and the need for consultants in helping us keep the billing going and collection going on that system. So we did see some increase in those types of costs for consulting services. And then, and this was the first year that Natural Systems, some of their vegetative and stewardship enhancement costs that were in the capital program, they have then since been stabilized and moved into operating, where the maintenance is happening then on the operating side rather than the in the capital program. For capital costs, they totaled 91.1 million. That was an increase of 6.2 million or 7.3% compared to the same quarter of last year. And this really does reflect an increase in project delivery by the district for the last 2 years in particular. If you look back at the detail behind the capital program, you see that in earlier years, we're saying 50 to 70 million. In the last 2 years, we've been closer to the 84 to 91 million. And our budget in this next year, we actually have it set budget purposes, 147 million. We see some spend happening on the capital program, and we have been at this point then delivering on those projects. In 25, 3 big projects we worked on were Rock Creek Primary Clarifiers, $11 million cost spend in that year. For the lab in Forest Grove, 15 million. And we have a Forest Grove primary treatment project going in, and we spent 19 million on that in this 2025 fiscal.
What are your labor costs? Do you have unions?
Yes, we have Teamsters. About half of our workforce is represented. So results of operations for the district for fiscal 25, and these are all based on now audited financial statement numbers. The audit was completed in early December for us. So we continue to focus on the key areas where our spend is below budget, and that's on the staff recruitment and then delivery of the planned capital investments. So we continue to monitor and inform in those areas. As an awareness, when you look at non-restricted revenue reserves overall for all funds within the district, those went up by $9.8 million in fiscal year 25. But this was the first time that our operating fund, sanitary sewer fund and swim fund, they transfer money over into our capital programs to do the capital projects in that year. This was the first year that we needed to do the full budgeted transfer of money into those construction funds because of the level of construction and capital projects going. So we did that $75 million transfer out of operations in that year. And so if you look at our sanitary operating fund, its reserves went down this year for the first time at 5.7 million.
After all that, Kathy, what will, as we complete this budget year we're in, what will the full extent of the reserve fund sit at?
So we'll see how we end the year. We actually put some money in we put in our budget the option of issuing debt because of the size of the capital. Because as we sit now, we would see a reduction in our reserves if we fulfill the capital investment that we plan. And we didn't issue debt. So it is about 50 million, I believe. So we're monitoring the projects, we're monitoring the market. If we do the debt issuance, we also want to look at our Build America bonds and refund those as to get outside of the federal sequestration program that threatens every year to reduce our savings on that. So if we did go out and do that issuance, we're really watching how the spend goes and how our savings in other areas are playing out.
Yeah, sorry. My question was, at the end of the year,
Mhm.
having been on the
That's
budget
26.
committee, I thought there was somewhere in the ballpark of $300 or $400 million of total reserves that
Mhm.
CWS had. I'm just curious, at the end of the current budget year, what if we budgeted
Mhm.
to end the reserve fund at?
So total, I'd have to look for sure. I don't want to say top of my head, but it 360 million,
Mhm.
something like that. But I'd have to look for
Thank
sure. But yeah, but that all depends on whether we do that debt issuance. Sure. Really, so this, some of the takeaways for results of operations for this year. Revenues collected were strong in the year. And we are continuing to do our capital spend more in alignment with the budget. Reflects then this potential reduction in reserves over time to meet some of those capital projects.
Good question. Oh. I haven't exceeded my quota yet. No. One more. So, one of the points you said, the increases that you saw in things like M&S, but anticipated. Is there any idea of what they over your anticipation, what they below your anticipated increase or?
In alignment, just in line, they were in line with what we were, so where we saw increases year over year, they were in areas that we were aware of and had budgeted for. Because then, and you see overall budget spent was in alignment with past years. We were pretty close on, 80% of labor, 88% of M&S. I mean, we're pretty similar to past years where, in particular on the labor side, we have about a 10% vacancy or 50 FTE vacancy that really could be about 10 to 15 million in a given year of unspent budget.
I'll get this question into, you had to go through any kind of spending cuts, spending savings, or spending efficiency on.
We're always looking to spend efficiently, right, and innovate, and so obviously, spending under budget, we tried to find efficiencies and cost savings. And this year coming up, if you were aware of, like, within the budget process, our budget and forecast actually had a 4% rate increase, and the board had asked us to work within a 3% rate increase instead and find cost savings within that. So we have been monitoring that over this period, and really you see that on the labor side of meeting those cost reductions, staying within the rate. But on the capital program side, I believe we're going to spend close to the 120 million that we budgeted there.
Okay. For all the price increase next year.
Do you have any sense on the capital portion, how much of that's SDC and how much of it's?
We usually move over about 20 million in SDC a year.
Oh.
So we do more capital investment than we receive in SDC funds.
Yeah, you should have done.
I think that's your most volatile form of revenue, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You can't bond against it.
Yeah. Are you accrual based?
Yes, full accrual.
Who does the audit?
Baker Tilly, who used to be Moss Adams.
Okay. Thank you.
You just finished your audits too.
Yeah, it got done, and got our clean opinion on December 5th. We had our second meeting of our newly formed Clean Water Services Audit Committee. So we used to be part of the county on their committee, and the county's big and very different than Clean Water. And it felt like we didn't really have the the oversight and the review that the county was getting when we were combined with them. So we broke off to do our own committee. And we had our first meeting back in July as we started in for mid and interim audit. And we did the final just recently on, I think it was the 6th.
Your fiscal year.
Yes,
You're not
we're
counting.
June 30. Yeah.
So then the revenues go up so much in the fourth quarter in the spring from,
The revenues.
that's, I presume, your fourth quarter, your fiscal year.
Yeah, so, well, our revenues actually come in pretty evenly during the year. If you look at it, they come in,
I'm sorry,
yeah, it's the expenditure side that
it's also the,
that can have a lower spend in that first quarter because a lot of the billings that are coming in, they relate to the prior year and we have to accrue them back. And so that's why we catch up in that third quarter and fourth quarter, you start seeing a disproportionate increase. So it's not like 25, 50, 75.
do you adjust the prior year based on what you get the first quarter?
No.
All right, so instead you accrue them back.
So we accrue back. So if it relates to billed revenue, through June 30, we accrue it back. If it relates to a contract or an expenditure that was incurred and owed at June 30, we accrue it back. So we accrue back stuff between July and October of a year to get it into the right. And that's really a budget law issue and an accrual, but a budget law too, that you have to recognize the expenditures in the year it's appropriated.
Any other questions for Kathy? No, thank you, Kathy. I'll welcome any members of the public who would like to provide public comment. We'll have up to 2 minutes and Katie will be your time.
Stand up for 2 minutes.
Stand up.
Yeah, so you can see it.
We have a
Dale Feek, as I said before. I just have a question for all of you. How many people take the Oregonian? Oh. Audit confirms pricey meals lacks record keeping. Independent reviewed followed the Oregonian investigation by Jamie Goldberg. Jamie Goldberg has had at least 3 major full-page articles on clean water services in the lacks of keeping track of who spends money for travel, who spends money for food and all those things. The independent auditor, I go to the county work sessions and Brad Anderson was there and gave 2 presentations. He gave a presentation on this audit and the auditor person was there and it was very informative. I would really encourage you as people here to be informed of what's going on in the county and what they say. I just would encourage that. And the auditor was from Marone Analytics. And she has talked about it here. So you can just Google the Oregonian and Google this and you can read it, I guess. Although you have to have a subscription. So I don't know how you're going to read it, but I'd really encourage you to get informed. And Rick Shanley, the interim director, general manager, also gave a presentation. And they are changing from a executive director to general manager because it's more operations now of clean water services and not going to layoffs, not going to someplace else, showing how good they are. And clean water services is good, but the money now is not to be spent on that type of expenditure. It's to be spent on operations of sewer and stormwater and get it very efficient and very good, okay? And make sure the public knows what's happening. And I really am pleased that the county and Clean Water Services is going to have separate websites now. It's going to be much better so that people can be more informed and you will be able to easily click on Clean Water Services and know what's going on. Thank you, Katie.
Can I ask you, what's the date of that particular article you're referring to?
Wednesday.
This was there.
It's Wednesday, January the 14th. Yeah, and here it is. Here's the inside.
And that's
Here's the Diane Taniguchi that had resigned because she took the pressure and.
It was long back and I thought it was all done.
Right here. It's work. And the article's very well done because I'm there listening to it all and she did a very good job. So take a look at it.
Thank you.
Sherilyn, did you have a question?
Well, I just wanted to make a comment that, thank you to Elizabeth for sending out the audit, that the Oregonian article was based on the audit, the whole audit report and Clean Water Services response to that audit report. And just more broadly, those of you that were here, was it a year ago, I, came with a statement from the rest of on behalf of the other city managers and regarding the whole situation. And I've been very impressed with the resolution and order that was made by the county, by the board, and then the follow-up that Clean Water Services has undertaken. And I just appreciate you sending out that and like subjecting Clean Water Services to the forensic audit and then responding with the policies and, just all the follow-up. So it wasn't pleasant. I mean, there were things in there that, that called out things that had happened, but it appears, and I know we all have an interest in good government and building trust in government. And I think those kind of audits, forensic audits, and the policies that come out of them and the due diligence builds trust. So thank you.
And I would like to say also that the auditor was a totally independent auditor. That was a question. And the auditor was very complimentary of Clean Water staff because anytime she wanted something, they gave it to her. So the Clean Water Services staff people did a wonderful job cooperating with that auditor. Yeah. Independent auditor.
Do it again.
Yeah. Okay, next up, we have announcements. Good.
I will try and do the speed round. Thank you, Chair Song. Saying before we start, I really try and make a commitment to get you out of here by 8:30. We'll do it by 8:35. Just to follow up on the conversation. So we had our resolution in order 25-5 that had 14 different actions for Clean Water Services to take as part of our effort to rebuild trust. This forensic investigation was the final piece. I'll be working with our legal team to actually put together a fresh resolution in order talking about what are our commitments going forward. So the board has requested that. You'll see a copy of it when it comes to fruition. It will happen at one of our new standalone CWS board meetings. But thank you for being along on the ride this last year. Really appreciate it. I know it hasn't always been comfortable or fun for any of us. Next week, we have the launch of our general manager recruitment. So on Tuesday, January 20th, that position will go live. I will circulate a link to all of you so that you can have the materials, you can share it with your networks. We have I'll also include a list of the sort of key dates on the hiring process. So keep your eyes peeled for that. We will be doing a national recruitment for that role. Last but not least, we will be coming back to you, I believe, next month, March at the latest, but we'll be wanting to convene a subcommittee to do work on design and construction standards. So before we adjourned for the year last year, we had an action-packed, dense meeting where one of the topics we talked about was design and construction standards. So we know that there's going to be a lot of policy work that needs to occur in relation to that. We do have our public forum that will happen later this year, but we wanted more time with CWAC to kind of dig into that subject matter. And we thought the subcommittee forum worked well with the West Basin Master Plan. So think on it. If you want to spend a little bit more time with our team, working on those issues. So I'm just gonna plant that seed. That's it for me.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Okay, there being no further business this evening, CWAC is adjourned.
Oh, Rebecca has expressed an interest. Fantastic.
Oh, yep. Next meeting will be held on February 11th. Over to you, Glenn.
They've nominated Stu for the construction, so.
We're adjourned.
Yes.